are tame tigers and tame cobras, but if one says, "I have a cobra in my pocket," or "There is a tiger in the music room," the adjective "tame" has to be somewhat hastily added. If one speaks of beasts, one thinks first of wild beasts; if of flowers, one thinks first of wild flowers. But there are two great exceptions, caught so completely into the wheel of man's civilization, entangled so unalterably with his ancient emotions and images, that the artificial product seems more natural than the natural. The dog is not a part of natural history, but of human history; and the real rose grows in a garden. All must regard the elephant as something tremendous but tamed; and many, especially in our great cultured centres, regard every bull as presumably a mad bull. In the same way we think of most garden trees and plants as fierce creatures of the forest or morass, taught at last to endure the curb. But with the dog and the rose this instinctive principle is reversed. With them we think of the artificial as the archetype, the earth born as the erratic exception. We think vaguely of the wild dog as if he had run away, like the stray cat; and we cannot help fancying that the wonderful wild rose of our hedges has escaped by jumping over the hedge. Perhaps they fled together, the dog and the rose, a singular and on the whole an imprudent elopement. Perhaps the treacherous dog crept from the kennel, and the rebellious rose from the flower bed, and they fought their way out in company, one with teeth and the other with thorns. Possibly this is why my dog becomes a wild dog when he sees roses, and kicks them anywhere. Possibly this is why the wild rose is called the dog rose. Possibly not. But there is in this degree of dim barbaric truth in the quaint old world legend that I have just invented, that in these two cases the civilized product is felt to be fiercer, nay, even the wilder. Nobody seems to be afraid of a wild dog. He is classed among the jackals and the servile beasts. The terrible cave canem is written over man's creation. When we read "Beware the dog," it means beware of the tame dog; for it is the tame dog that is terrible. He is terrible in proportion as he is tame. It is his loyalty and his virtues that are awful to the stranger, even the stranger within your gates; still more to the stranger halfway over your gates. He is alarmed at such deafening and furious docility. He flees from that great monster of mildness. Well, I have much the same feeling when I look at the roses, rank, red, and thick and resolute round a garden. They seem to me bold and even blustering. I hasten to say that I know even less about my own garden than about anybody else's garden. I know nothing about roses, not even their names. I know only the name Rose, and Rose is, in every sense of the word, a Christian name. It is Christian in the one absolute and primordial sense of Christian, that it comes down from the age of pagans. The rose can be seen and even smelt in Greek, Latin, Provençal, Gothic, Renaissance, and Puritan poems. Beyond this mere word "rose," which, like wine and other noble words, is the same in all the tongues of white men, I know literally nothing. I have heard the more evident and advertised names. I know there is a flower which calls itself the glory of Dijon, which I had supposed to be its cathedral. In any case, to have produced a rose and a cathedral is to have produced not only two very glorious and humane images, but also, as I maintain, two very soldierly and defiant things. I also know there is a rose called Marechal Niel. Note once more the military ring. And when I was walking round my garden the other day, I spoke to my gardener, an enterprise of no little valour, and asked him the name of a strange dark rose that had somehow oddly taken my fancy. It was almost as if it reminded me of some turbid element in history and the soul. Its red was not only swarthy but smoky; there was something congested and wrathful about its colour. It was at once theatrical and sulky. The gardener told me it was called Victor Hugo. Therefore it is that I feel all roses to have some secret power about them; even their names may mean something in connection with themselves in which they differ from nearly all the sons of men. But the rose itself is royal and dangerous. Long as it has remained in the rich house of civilization, it has never laid off its armour. A rose always looks like a mediaeval gentleman of Italy, with a cloak of crimson and a sword; for the thorn is the sword of the rose. And there is this real moral in the matter, that we have to remember that civilization, as it goes on, ought not perhaps to grow more fighting, but ought to grow more ready to fight. The more valuable and reposeful is the order we have to guard, the more vivid should be our ultimate sense of vigilance and potential violence. And when I walk round a summer garden, I can understand how those high mad lords at the end of the Middle Ages, just before their swords clashed, caught at roses for their instinctive emblems of empire and rivalry. For to me any such garden is full of the war of the roses. The Gold of Glastonbury. One silver morning I walked into a small grey town of stone, like 20 other grey western towns, which happened to be called Glastonbury, and saw the magic thorn of near 2000 years growing in the open air as casually as any bush in my garden. In Glastonbury, as in all noble and humane things, the myth is more important than the history. One cannot say anything stronger of the strange old tale of St. Joseph and the Thorn than that it dwarfs St. Dunstan. Standing among the actual stones and shrubs, one thinks of the first century and not of the 10th. One's mind goes back beyond the Saxons and beyond the greatest statesmen of the Dark Ages. The tale that Joseph of Arimathea came to Britain is presumably a mere legend, but it is not by any means so incredible or preposterous a legend as many modern people suppose. The popular notion is that the thing is quite comic and inconceivable, as if one said that Wat Taylor went to Chicago or that John Bunyan discovered the North Pole. We think of Palestine as little, localized, and very private; of Christ's followers as poor folk, as strict globbists, rooted to their towns or trades; and we think of vast routes of travel and constant world communications as things of recent and scientific origin. But this is wrong; at least the last part of it is. It is part of that large and placid lie that the rationalists tell when they say that Christianity arose in ignorance and barbarism. Christianity arose in the thick of a brilliant and bustling cosmopolitan civilization. Long sea voyages were not so quick, but were quite as incessant as today; and though in the nature of things Christ had not many rich followers, it is not unnatural to suppose that he had some; and a Joseph of Arimathea may easily have been a Roman citizen with a yacht that could visit Britain. The same fallacy is employed with the same partisan motive in the case of the Gospel of St. John, which critics say could not have been written by one of the first few Christians, because of its Greek transcendentalism and its Platonic tone. I am no judge of the philology, but every human being is divinely appointed judge of the philosophy; and the Platonic tone seems to me to prove nothing at all. Palestine was not a secluded valley of barbarians; it was an open province of a polyglot empire, overrun with all sorts of people of all kinds of education. To take a rough parallel, suppose some great prophet arose among the Boers in South Africa. The prophet himself might be a simple or unlettered man; but no one who knows the modern world would be surprised if one of his closest followers were a professor from Heidelberg or an M.A. from Oxford. All this is not urged here with any